Hi everyone, and welcome to the Force Society for Kids Mental Health Monthly In the Know Education and Networking Series. My name is Robin Brown, and I am a Programs Manager with the Force. Tonight we are broadcasting from BC Women's Health Centre at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Tonight's topic is collaborative problem solving, and next month's topic will be about parent engagement and positive school advocacy, and is entitled Beyond Advocacy, Building Stronger Learning Communities Through Authentic Parent Engagement. All previous In the Know sessions have been recorded and can be viewed online at the Force Society's website at www.forcesociety.com. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and now I'd like to introduce our first presenter this evening, Ross Robinson. Ross Robinson has worked in child and youth mental health as a clinician and a therapist in the Lower Mainland for 17 years. He has training in psychology from both major universities in Alberta, in clinical psychology from SFU, and has practiced in hospital and community mental health settings in a career that spans 38 years. Ross works at the Youth Day Treatment Program in Copeland and also at the Maples Adolescent Treatment Center. Ross is also active in wheelchair sports and holds director positions on the board of the BC Wheelchair Sports Association and the Force Society for Kids Mental Health. And welcome, Ross.
Thank you, Robin. First of all, thank you, and welcome to all of you. I know it's, I'm glad to have you here. I know it's hard to take time away from your family at times, and but by taking this time today, I think it speaks volumes about the number of you out there that are wanting to do more for your kids. So congratulations and good on you for doing that. I'm really fortunate today to have a couple of moms with me, Victoria and Karen, who, after I present a little bit about collaborative problem solving, they will talk to you about how they've used their experiences with using this approach with their children, both of whom have bouts of anxiety, and I think all of us can relate to times when we're at a loss of what to do. So as we begin to think about the problems that arise with anxious kids, it can be anything from wanting to go to bed, or not wanting to go to bed, to having full-out tantrums and explosions with crying, yelling over things such as homework and school refusal. But I would like you to remember, you as the parents are the experts. You're the one that spends 24/7 with your kids, and you know your children better than anyone, particularly better than those of us professionals that work in the field. And I think there's times when you know your kids better than they know themselves, perhaps, and other times when not so much, of course. So even as professionals in the field, we need tools to do our job well. So learning problem-solving skills are an example of some tools that we use in our practice that may help you so that you can do your job as parents to the best of your ability. So as Robin mentioned, we're talking about collaborative problem-solving today. This approach was developed by Dr. Ross Greene in his book, The Explosive Child. And there's the website you see on the screen there as well that will cover all the information that I'm going to talk about in much more detail. So my attempt will be to give you an overview of the key concepts and how you can apply them in our lives. The book, by the way, is available to buy or borrow, and it'll be on the resources list at the end of this presentation. Most important thing to note with collaborative problem solving is just what it says. It's collaborative. So two people are working out a problem. It's not crisis intervention. It's a process we can learn to apply to a wide variety of problems. And Victoria and Karen will tell you it takes patience, detective work, and a willingness to really try to understand your child better. We all know that children act out their anxiety differently. I'm sure you're well aware of that. Sure, some explode, but they can also avoid, cry, or be defiant. All behaviors which can be a problem not only for the child, but for those of us around them. And you likely know how your child expresses his or her anxiety. The question is, how do we work with them? what's the primary goal? We're going to be talking a bit about expectations today. So is the expectation or the goal to stop the behavior, or maybe to start the behavior if you're trying to get your kid to go to bed, for instance, and they want to stay up? Or is it to really understand why it happens in the first place? So it depends on what pair of lenses you put in the glasses that you're using to think about the problem behavior and perceive what's going on there, because that will guide how you intervene with your child, and it'll influence your approach to managing the problem. Also, I would suggest that you think about the labels that you use to describe your child's behavior. Things like manipulative, controlling us, wants own way, and has selective memory. I think in many instances, all of you can think that those would apply sometimes. And those labels can reveal some of the theories that you have about the behavior. So let's put things in context a little bit by examining some traditional approaches to parenting, such as the behavioral approach, where we could look at using ABCs, where A is the antecedents, B is the behavior, and C is the consequences. And this approach encourages us to look for those antecedents, or the triggers, in other words, the choices the child makes before the behavior in question, but it asks us to focus on the responses or the outcome of the behavior in terms of whether it should be rewarded or have consequences applied. So this approach really hinges on consistency and managing contingencies. In other words, if this happens, then apply this reward or this consequence. So, I've got the right one here, okay. When kids then, through this lens, looking at them through the behavior lens, for instance, if you look at them choosing to be non-compliant or lazy or not motivated or just outright defiant, we're using that lens that focuses on the belief that kids do well if they want to do well. The real question is whether such an approach really teaches or guides the child to learn the skills to manage future situations. For example, if you use corporal punishment, and I know that can be controversial at times, you may get immediate compliance with whatever you've told them to do, but there tends to be side effects associated with this approach, especially for a child with anxiety. Things like performance anxiety, depressive thinking, thinking that there must be something wrong with them, even aggression and counter control. In other words, they may learn that the way you deal with conflict is through punishment, and they would apply that approach, or they may apply that approach in their interaction with others. It may be siblings, it may be with their peers. So you get temper outbursts, and that can lead to social humiliation and social stigma, and it actually tends to reduce their motivation, their intrinsic motivation to do well. In other words, if we're saying to them, do it, and they don't have the skills to carry out what you want them to do, what happens? Well, for some, it'll be a meltdown and an explosion in some cases, and withdrawal and emotional shutdown for others. Maybe think about it this way. When we take medications, or we have medications that our children are taking, and they have negative side effects, we want options. We go to the doctor or whoever's prescribing the medication and want to address this. So why do we tolerate negative side effects of the behavioral approach? It doesn't teach the skills the child needs, nor does it inform you what the problem is to begin with and why it happens. It can be like kind of squishing them into compliance. And the behaviors, again, for anxious kids in particular, tend to escalate over time, and they'll actually torpedo the relationship between you as the parent and the child. Maybe the idea is to put on a different lens and see the child as doing the best they can with what they have. The key concept then for collaborative problem solving is that challenging kids are challenging because they lack the skills, or in other words, they will do well if they can do well, even if it looks intentional. And that's what I mean. If you have that label of being manipulative or controlling and so on, it can color how you view what your child is doing. And it's important because I don't think any one of us chooses to go through life upset and struggling. So let me give you another example. If someone asked you to explain quantum physics to them, could you do it? Maybe, depending on what you do for a living, you could. I know if you're like me and most of us, no way. What if they gave you $500 to do that? What if they gave you $1 million? What if you said you can't, but they're going to take your car away because you refused? Would that help? That's an extreme, possibly silly example, but it helps demonstrate the lens that we look through with our kids. They are doing well if they can, not because they don't want to succeed. So collaborative problem solving is the orientation is on skill deficits, not on motivation deficits. So it focuses on the front end of the behavior. Again, those triggers we talked about earlier, not the outcome. In other words, when is it happening and what situations? So your job as parents then is to find out what's getting in their way so we can help them do well. This takes a lot of detective work and patience. And you'll hear that term a lot. And I'm sure Karen and Victoria will mention that as well. So what are some of these skill deficits or lagging skills? Well, one of them relates to executive skills, kind of shifting their cognitive set. So it's like going from one environment to another. And an example in school might be going from recess to silent reading in class. Or at home, it's from watching TV to helping with dinner. Another one might be language processing skills, being able to express in the language what we're thinking and feeling. Again, an example for someone who doesn't have language is an animal, okay, a dog. If you step on the dog's tail, he's going to bark, or he's going to bite you, or he's going to run away, because dogs don't have the language to be able to explain themselves. How interesting that we can parallel the same responses with kids with anxiety. If they can't explain what's going on, they're distressed and upset, but they can't explain what's happening, they will avoid and cry and yell and, in some cases, explode. Another one, emotional regulation. And this is the ability to kind of regulate the ups and downs in your mood and feelings. And anxiety certainly falls in this category because it has the potential to actually make rational thought much more difficult. And that relates to the next one too, cognitive flexibility. The tendency, again, particularly with anxious kids, to think in black and white, that there's very little gray. This, again, we see in anxiety. When things are unpredictable, they can get scary. Also, any one of us, if we get anxious, our ability to focus narrows. It doesn't broaden out. So again, it makes it harder to, quote-unquote, think things through. Social skills. Again, kids with anxiety do want to fit in, but something stops them. Usually it's relating to their self-confidence. And when they're anxious, they may attribute an innocent comment made by another peer or adult as being critical or malicious towards them. Okay, so some of the unmet expectations that go along with these: getting to bed, doing homework, going to school, maintaining hygiene, certainly, that can be an issue. Right up to drug and alcohol issues, but again with the hygiene, brushing teeth, swearing, hitting, tantrums. Okay? Now, I just want to, before we go on, I mentioned medications before. I didn't want to suggest that that medications can't be helpful. In fact, in some cases, they may very well be helpful for a child who, in order to put them in a space where they can be more receptive to learning the skills that they need to solve problems. So with anxious kids, it may be a medication for anxiety and or depressive thinking that they have that goes along with that in many cases. Or if it's they have attention and concentration problems. Any one of these medications will help facilitate their ability to focus and concentrate better, to listen, to wait their turn, to shift their thinking, as we were talking about before, or in some cases to simply sit still. However, medication can't accomplish that on their own. They still need you to help them learn the skills that they need. So you've got a new job description here. Regardless of what you do for a living, when your child shows defiant, avoiding, explosive behavior, however your child expresses anxiety, it's important for you to put on your detective hat. Your job is to figure out what skills they might be lacking that are standing in their way. Some of this information, again, is available on the website for Dr. Green's book. This is your own assessment. It's not a diagnostic tool. Indeed, if your child has been given a diagnosis, the actual diagnosis is only relevant to the extent that it helps define the skill challenges that your child is facing. No question that collaborative problem solving may be difficult to do with very young children or kids with autism spectrum disorder. But even kids on the spectrum there are still able to communicate, so a collaborative approach is still useful. Remember, you've got your detective hat on, and you've got the lens on that if kids do well, kids will do well if they can. So let's look at some of the unmet expectations. And as parents, you always have three choices about how you deal with those unmet expectations and those unsolved problems. Just to be clear, you as parents are perfectly entitled to have expectations for your child. It's a natural thing to do. But when your child cannot meet your expectations, your choices are basically three. Plan A. Make them meet your expectations. And this tends to be the most commonly preferred choice for many parents, asserting your will as a parent. Indeed, this plan does have a place. It's quite appropriate when it involves issues of health and safety. For instance, if your child just darts out onto the street without looking both ways or chases after a ball, and in some cases when they need to go see the doctor or the dentist, whatever the case may be, you're not going to negotiate with them around those things. It may be different in every family. Also, this plan gives a whole new meaning to the word manipulation. What is the goal if the expectation is, I'm the adult and the authority, and you do what I tell you? Do you want obedience to all authority and never have the child exercise their own opinion? Of course, as long as it's done respectfully. The thing is, this plan doesn't work so well when what you're demanding is something the child cannot do. A very quick example, it's pretty hard to tell a child to make their bed if no one's ever shown them how to do it. And for a child with anxiety who wants to please, or is a perfectionist, and this is often the case, this approach can be pretty overwhelming and make matters worse, not better. Now, there are also anxious kids that do want to be told what to do, and I think that'll be talked about later. And the thing is, do you want them to be unable to make a decision for themselves and follow along with whatever's going on? Because that becomes more difficult as they get older and the demands in school get harder, as well as the social situations. Do you want them to follow whatever's going on with a group of kids? That can have scary implications sometimes. Plan B. This is the collaborative process to help solve unsolved problems. And unsolved problems really is unmet expectations that are colliding with these skill deficits or lagging skills in a situation where something is needed. So it can work for light problems, like the one I was talking about, making the bed, but also for the most severe difficulties. In other words, it works when it's clear what your goal is. And we'll come back to the steps involved in implementing a plan like this. Plan C. Some will say this plan is about giving in, but that's not the whole story. As you see the character in the slide, he's thinking of the storm ahead and choosing to drop the expectation altogether, at least for now. It's in the spirit of picking your battles. In other words, such as going to bed or staying up to shower, could be an example. And this is a plan that tends to be the least commonly preferred, but actually it's the most common option when plan A is repeated time and time again and you get exhausted. You say, screw it, I don't have the energy for this, okay? So think about unmet expectations that you may have about your kids for a minute. Maybe even write them down and try to identify which one you want to have a plan B discussion about with your child. Maybe which ones are plan C's for now, and which ones involve health and safety and fit with plan A. So the steps involved in collaborative processing, or problem solving. This is about, let's think how we can work this out together. It's about acting proactively, not in the moment when everybody's hot and under time pressure. So let's look at each step one at a time, and we'll provide you with a handout that talks about these steps. Okay? So the first one is empathy. It's leading with empathy. The goal of empathy is actually to achieve the clearest possible understanding of your child's concern or their perspective about any given unsolved problem. It's really, really trying to put yourself in your child's shoes for a moment in order to experience their thoughts and feelings as if they were your own. You want to drill down for information to get to the root of the problem. And language is really important here. The use of really neutral and open-ended questions and comments is really key. It's not a time for judgments, opinions, or conclusions. So something like, I've noticed that, and then put in whatever your observation of the problem is, what's up? And use your style of talking. You don't have to use my words. And it takes practice. Don't rush yourself on this. It takes time. One of the biggest obstacles, in fact, is you may get a blank look and silence. Likely because your child's simply not used to hearing you want to know their side of things. And this can be painful. We just don't know how to deal with it sometimes. But if we're patient, then maybe we'll be able to help them tell us what's up instead of telling us what we think we want to hear. And maybe they don't have the language, or they aren't able to express it and need time to think about it. Allow them that time and revisit it at another time. You may not get past this part in the first few times that you try this. And probably the hardest thing to do with this step is to suspend your own judgments and opinions temporarily, not completely. But remember, the goal here is to listen to your child and to gather the information you need in order to understand your child's perspective of the problem. The second step, this is where you as the parent place your concerns on the table. And it's important not to confuse this step with plan A. This isn't imposing your will. It's not about that. This is to have your concerns addressed. It's an equal playing field now, because now you have a sense of your child's concern, and up to now, maybe your child doesn't even know what your concern is, or you haven't explained why you have that concern. So this is just, we don't want them to do something. They may think that you just don't want them to do something or act in a certain way. You haven't explained why. So phrases like, my concern is, or the thing is, insert your concern, helps clarify your perspective for your child. And make sure the child understands what your concern is. Even have them restate it back to you to phrase it. And if they understand, then reiterate both their concern and yours, so everybody is starting with the same information. Then the next step, now that you have both issues out in the open and we know what they are, you're not just guessing, it's time to come together. Here, the goal is to invite your child to brainstorm and explore solutions to the problem together with you. So something like, I wonder if there's a way we, and then insert your both concerns, or I wonder how we can, something along those lines. Anything to kind of get things started that way. Now, of course, ideally, the child comes up with one possible solution, and that's part of the skill training. It doesn't mean that you have to agree or condone your child's perspective on their solution, or let go of your concern. It's not a matter of just letting anything go. The issue is what's the middle ground so that the proposed solution is both reasonable, in other words, the solution really does address both your concerns and your child's concerns, and secondly, it's doable. Both people can do it. So if your child's solution that is proposed addresses your concern as the parent, it's a solution worthy of a trial, rather than thinking that they're just pulling the wool over your eyes. You might want to even look at what are the consequences of your decisions together. So you can help the child see what might happen if they choose that particular solution. The bottom line, kids will engage, and they do engage, if they feel engaged, that you're making a real effort to try and get their perspective, as opposed to feeling like they're in battle mode more often than not. Also, if a child feels heard and understood, they can let go a lot of the resistance that they may have shown to you beforehand. It boils down, this whole approach boils down to a way of communicating with your child in a way that maintains and even strengthens the relationship between you and leaves both of you feeling much better afterwards. If you contrast that with when you're applying Plan A or Plan C, my guess is that you don't feel particularly good afterwards for you or for the child. So what are the potential pitfalls of this approach? Well, there can be dueling solutions. In other words, if you phrase a nicely worded Plan A, it's still Plan A. It's imposing your will. And a perfunctory Plan B is you're paying lip service to your child's concern, but you're really not taking it seriously. And the idea of, I mentioned drilling for information. Grilling for information looks different, and it's more, there's more pressure in those situations. And lessening, not listening. It's really important that your child feels like they've been heard, as I've said before. And certainly what can complicate matters if it's a poorly defined, unsolved problem, if it's not really clear if it's a problem for you, but not so much for your child or vice versa. So yes, Plan B can certainly take time and patience, but I would suggest to you that it's not as much time as continually choosing Plan A and it's not working. Typically, the repeated use of Plan A leaves both of you feeling lousy afterwards, as I was saying before. So how do you tell which plan is being used? Well, Plan A is the adult concern is on the table. Plan B, both your concerns are on the table, both for you and the child. And Plan C is where the child's concern is on the table. You decided to drop the expectation for now. And the goals for each one. So if you look at understanding what the cause of the problem is, Plan A doesn't accomplish that. Plan B does. And Plan C, no. What about reducing the risk of a meltdown? Plan A, not so much. Plan B, yes. And Plan C, yes, because you're not even dealing with it at the time. What about reducing the long-term risk of problem recurrence? Again, with Plan A, it'll keep coming back, not atypically. Plan B, that's the goal, is you really understand the problem so it doesn't keep coming up time and time again. And Plan C, no, because you're not even dealing with it at that time. And finally, pursuing adult expectations. Well, yes, Plan A does accomplish that, but so does Plan B. And again, in Plan C, not so much. So I would encourage you to practice this at home. It takes a lot of practice. And I would really like to then now turn things over to Karen and Victoria to explain their experiences using collaborative problem solving with their children. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ross, for helping explain the theory behind collaborative problem solving. There's a lot of information that you shared with us, but as you said, people can access resources and books to learn more. And now we would like to introduce Victoria Keddis and Karen Copeland, both of whom are parents of children. Victoria is the mother of 2 older teenagers, and Karen is the mother of 2 school-age children. And they are going to walk us through some real-life examples and really help explain how collaborative problem solving can be used in families.
So I was a really amazing parent, and then I had kids. I think of the first lessons I learned even before I had children. I was working with kids just like us at a summer camp. And the training that they gave us was Barbara Coloroso, and her line was, "There is no problem so big it can't be solved." So that became a core belief for me as a parent, and it was the one thing I carried through all the time with my kids and reminded them. And as they became teenagers, it was really important to make sure that they knew that there's nothing they couldn't handle, because with that, it also really opened up conversation that they were able to come to us and have those hard conversations. We want our children to be able to deal with anything that comes their way. And with Plan A and Plan C, we end up with kids that, when we do that, we model that they can give up, and that's okay, or that they can be led easily. And we don't want our kids being led easily, because that means that there's someone else who's going to be really willing to tell them what to do, whether it be drugs when they're not ready, whether it be those bigger issues that they can step into. But it also shows them that it's okay to give up. So Plan C and Plan A do those things, but Plan A, it really gives them the confidence to be able to stand up and Plan B. Did I say Plan C?
You said Plan A, actually.
Wow. See, now I'm going to really screw you up. So Plan B is that confidence that it gives them. It gives them that ability to stand up for what matters to them and have a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the important thing to remember about using Plan B is that even if you don't actually make it to the solution part of the process, you can congratulate yourself on at least setting the stage for a good conversation to happen with your child about what the problem actually is. And I think if you look at it from the perspective of in your own life when you're dealing with a problem, how easily is it solved and how quickly is it solved? It's not something that happens immediately, and sometimes it takes a few extra steps that we didn't maybe anticipate in solving the problem. One of the things that I read about collaborative problem solving that really stood out for me was that it's not necessarily a technique as much as it is an incremental problem process. So you solve it in steps, and it's not something that you solve immediately. It's an ongoing thing. So one of my suggestions to you all out there is that probably most of you are already using a form of Plan B. You're just not aware of it. So maybe becoming more mindful of the whole process and be gentle with yourself. You don't always have to be perfect at everything you do. It's a learning process. Yeah, we're not perfect. And believe you me, I've used Plan A and Plan C. And I think you have to be patient and allow yourself not to be perfect. And remember your overall goal, which is to understand why the problem is occurring in the first place. And as Ross mentioned, you have to become a detective and put on that detective hat, because sometimes our kids just are not used to being able to say what the problem is, or they maybe don't have the words to do it. So I'm just going to share an example of how I've used collaborative problem solving with my son. I would be dropping him off at school, and for about 3 or 4 days in a row, he would see the words Comic Life, which is a computer program, and he would just hit a wall. You could just see it in his body language. He'd be happy, and then all of a sudden he just, I don't want to be at school. I can't be here. I'm not doing Comic Life. And so, after the 4th day, I was like, okay, something's up with Comic Life. So I've noticed that. You're feeling really upset about Comic Life. What's up? What's going on? I don't like it. It's stupid. I don't need to do it. I know how to do it, so I've already done it. I don't need to do it again. Well, it seems like there's something going on. I'd like to know kind of what's expected of this. And so we went and we talked to the teacher, and I said, I was just wondering what the assignment is with this comic life. And so the teacher was able to say, well, it's actually pretty simple. I just want the kids to do a 4-page comic about anything that they want. And that's where my detective bells went ding, 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 because I know that my son has difficulty planning and organizing information, and where do I start? And I can recognize that in myself as well. If you tell me I can do something about anything I want, it's going to take me a long time to get started. So I was able to say to my son, well, I think that we should talk about this a little bit more at home after school, because, you're going into the school day, and I don't know that this is the right time. And so, we went through the rest of the day, and after school, then we had a chance to sit down and have a conversation about it. And I said, sometimes it's really hard to get started and to come up with an idea when we can do anything we want. And he said, yeah, it really is. I said, well, I know you like this and this and this, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about, pick a topic. And so then we were able to sit down and create the information that he needed in order to start the project. And once he had that, he actually went on to Comic Life, started the project, and then completely changed his focus to another topic and did the comic all on his own. And he felt so proud, and I felt really proud of his success. So that's an example of how I've used collaborative problem solving.
I really like that you came to it from that strength-based place, saying that you like this and this and this. So it wasn't about just doer. It was about all those steps to get there. That's awesome.
And he was really good at telling me when I was wrong, too, because I would say, well, why don't you tell me a story about this, and I'll write it down for you. He's like, no, I don't want to tell a story. I want the facts. Okay, perfect. Let's talk about the facts, right? And so it's really engaging in that whole process and really following his lead.
And it took him from such a place of deficit, too. That's awesome. I think about teens and how I deal with my teens with this issue. And it comes from that place of I don't just give one invitation, as they spoke of in the plan. I have to give two. I have to give one to even come have a conversation. Because as most kids are, they're distracted by what they're doing. And coming in sometimes demanding it to happen in the moment isn't always likely. So my first invitation is always to go to my child and say, so, I'd like to have a conversation sometime in the next couple of hours. Can you come find me when you got a moment? So it gives him time to finish what he's doing. It gives him time to be focused. And when he comes then to find me, he's focused and he's present and he's able to have a conversation. So that might look like me popping my head in the door saying, hey, can you come find me in a couple hours? I'd like to talk. And when he comes to me, I would say, so I've noticed on your report card there's some assignments that aren't completed. What's up with that? And then we would talk about different things. Sometimes it might be because the assignment was stupid. I don't want to do it. It doesn't make any sense. Sometimes it's just about how this assignment happened. It wasn't something that was able to be done on the spot, and his anxiety really gets in the way of that. And sometimes it's just he's not doing it. So we would go through that step, and he'd talk about all the things and the reasons why. And then my part in it with all the solutions would just be, is there anything I can do to help you through this process? And what is it you're willing to do to get through this process? And then just me casually saying, great, well, I'll check in by the end of the week, see how things went, and we'll go from there. It works with all kinds of issues with that. We deal with that with gaming, with computer time, with all of those self-management things, but it's always about letting them come to you when they're ready and then having the conversation and moving forward. So I think of it with those simple issues, but as a child care worker, I remember working with the really big issues too. It worked with things around theft and drug use. And as soon as I put on the table that it was them to have to come up with the solutions, they only came to the table with solutions that they were willing to follow through on. So already the possibility of success was far better than if we would have just imposed whatever we wanted to. So watching them come up with the solutions, and they were always far more dramatic than any I would have come up with. But the chance of success was built in. And I know when speaking with my kids about this kind of process, because I've talked to them about it over the years, and they say, you know what, I learned so much more by me coming up with a solution because it wasn't something I had to do. It wasn't something you imposed on me or told me to do or made me do. It was something that I thought was appropriate for what had gone on. So it's incredibly powerful that way. Yeah.
I like how you hit upon picking your moments. And I think that as parents, we often feel like we have to react and respond right away, especially if we're seeing our kids struggling, or maybe they're misbehaving in front of other people, where we kind of feel this need to control them. And so sometimes what happens when you choose to maybe do a plan C in that moment is you might end up having some outsiders kind of looking at you in an interesting way. And so it's really being confident in the knowledge that it's, you're not dropping it completely. You're dropping it in that situation to try and calm, and then you're going to approach the problem at a later time when, you're both calm, because if you're already elevated, nothing's going to happen. And if the kid is elevated, they're not going to hear a word that you're saying. They're just going to say, I wish you'd shut up.
Which we don't.
We just keep going. And sometimes it's just zip your lip. And I think we also, we need to examine our own expectations. And are we expecting too much or even too little of our kids? So when we examine our expectations, we put some responsibility on ourselves, and we take some ownership of how we might actually be contributing to the problem. And that takes a lot of self-reflection and courage to look inside yourself to figure out, I'm not perfect in this either. And just embracing that, because it is a process, and you aren't always going to be perfect, and that's the way it is. I'd like to share an example about morning routines and getting ready for school. And I'm not sure how many of you have challenges with getting your kids ready for school, but I know I certainly did with my daughter. And every morning would be just a disaster. And when I actually stopped and started to think about it, I recognized my own anxiety about being late, how that was contributing to the problem, because I cannot handle being late. I need to be early for everything. And I can remember walking up to this school, and my daughter walking beside me, and she's in a snit and I'm in a snit, and I said, Courtney, we can't be late. And she said, I don't care if I'm late. It's not a big deal. So you know how that conversation went. And so I thought, I think we need to sit down and talk about this. And as I was thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I'm really anxious about being late. And it's, for her, it's not as big a deal. So we've got competing expectations. So sitting down and having a conversation, you know what? It's going really, I don't feel good in the morning. You can't feel good in the morning. She says, no, I don't feel good in the morning. So what can we do? Like, we want to have a smooth morning. We want to love each other and feel like, we're starting the day on a good foot. I said, I noticed that you're really good at organizing everything at school for all your schoolwork. You have it all organized and you follow your timelines. And she said, yeah, I am. She said, I just can't get organized in the morning though. And I said, well, what is it that you do at school? She said, well, we have a list. I said, oh. And she said, I could make a list. I could make a list of what I need to do in the morning. And I said, that sounds like a great idea. Would you like some help with that? No, I can do it. And she went to her bedroom right then and there, wrote out her list, and we've not had a problem with mornings since. Yay. It's not going to go that smoothly all the time, just to keep it real.
I think about my son and you talking about knowing your child. It's that idea that my child is really anxious, and a long time we had to do only A and C because that's all we could manage and that's all we could cope with. He wanted people to tell him what to do because that took away the angst. But we know that's avoidance, and avoidance keeps anxiety alive and well. So being able to practice with him when it didn't matter, about choosing a meal or what clothes they were going to wear outside to play in the garden or whatever it might be, it was always choosing things that didn't matter to practice Plan B with, because if he had to choose, it was just so big and so overwhelming that we couldn't move forward. So practicing Plan B when it doesn't matter is what got us to be able to do Plan B on the bigger things. And his world got bigger and his ability to make decisions got bigger along with it. So letting Plan A and Plan C, they're useful at times. They helped him manage through a lot of really difficult times. but the practicing when it didn't matter gave him the ability to manage and have a bigger part in his life than I ever dreamed. So it is that whole idea that it's not always pretty.
Yes.
We have to practice a lot, and we want our child to be able to make those big decisions later on in life, and we want to know that they can solve their problems. And this is all about modeling how they're going to work out problems in the future, and this is how they're going to deal with all those hard things that come their way. And we know that it's a beautiful gift to both of us, our children and us, that we can know that they're going to be able to work through the big stuff.
Absolutely. I like how you touched on it's not pretty, and sometimes it can be really, really uncomfortable. And, you know, feel really awkward with it, but I think if you just keep in mind that you're both working towards a mutual outcome, it's so empowering for everybody, and the end result can be really amazing. It can be really fabulous, actually.
Yeah. Together is better.
Together is better, absolutely. So,
Thanks for being with us tonight, and enjoy your conversations with your groups.
thank you.